Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Laura Zempel and Nat Fuller, Emmy nominees this year for Outstanding Picture Editing for a limited or anthology series or movie for the Netflix series Beef. Congratulations, both of you, on this great Emmy nomination. I'm such a fan of the show. I guess first, how did you feel to find out, you were nominated for an Emmy here for Beef? I'm sure it was great, but how was it? How'd you find out?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I was hopeful, but I always try not to pay too much attention. And I was in the middle of a move, and I saw my phone ring and had the like, who be calling me this early? And then it was a friend calling to say congratulations. So it was a great way to find out. And then it was even sweeter to find out that the show got so many nominations. So that was really a thrill.
Yeah, Nat, how about you?
It was really fun. I actually went on like the live stream and I'm like, oh, I'm going to see it if we got it. And then I learned that we are not announced on that particular live stream. So my excellent assistant Ryan Romback texted me while I'm watching, and then he's like, "We got nominated." I'm like, "Oh yeah!" So it was great. I got to share that with my great assistant Ryan, and yeah, it was better than waiting around. I probably would have been waiting there still, waiting for them to announce the ending for a limited series, but it was really exciting to learn it from Ryan. And then yeah, and then I saw all the other nominations come in. I was super excited for all the actors and the directors and everybody got involved in the show. So it was a really great day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, the show, incredibly well received. The TV Academy clearly loved it. I think 13 nominations, Best Series, and multiple acting nominations, and you guys as well. I guess one of the things I loved about watching it, and it seems like the voters knew this too, is that it is a really great achievement. And I think one of the things I really loved is the tone is so specific, and I think a lot of that comes through certainly in the way you guys are editing. I know you worked on together on the finale, and then just across the series, you were kind of doing editing different episodes and stuff. I guess building it to that finale and kind of paying off the tone that is so set up in those first 9 episodes. I guess, can you talk a little about that and kind of how you approached the finale to make sure it really stuck the landing?
Yeah, the finale was so different than the rest of the season. It's actually I feel like the show goes so many different places. Sometimes it feels like a comedy, other times it's like an action movie. And so, when I got the script for the finale and it started with two crows talking to each other, it was just like, what am I in for? Like it could go anywhere. And it was very exciting. And, it's the first time Amy and Danny are really together for the bulk of an episode. And so that was a huge thrill. And then the finale, we wanted their relationship to feel as satisfying as possible because we've cat and moused them so long throughout the season that now we actually really get to spend time with them and understand their relationship and watch them find common ground, which is what, hopefully viewers have been wanting the whole time. So playing with that, and then, also finding the surreal elements to interweave throughout the episode because of the way Sunny wrote it, with the drug trip and all of the fun surprises that take place in that episode. It was a real thrill, and it almost felt like we were able to do anything because the show throughout the preceding 9 episodes went so many different places and took so many different risks. By the time we got to 10, it was just this freedom. It was wonderful.
Do you have with that also, I guess, are you doing things in the earlier episodes to build to the finale, I guess, or to make sure that stuff that happens in the finale, like you said, the first time they're together, and it is a huge tonal difference even between 9 and 10. Obviously there's a big shift, like you said, 9 is very action heavy, and 10 is much more existential, I guess. Are you doing stuff in those earlier episodes to make sure that the finale kind of lands the way you got, or are you thinking about that, I guess, as you're putting the whole series together and these other episodes you worked on before the finale?
Yeah, definitely. And part of that is script, but then part of that is also highlighting certain moments. I remember when I was cutting episode 2, when she points a gun at the crow, and I'm like, that needs to be very special because that ultimately is kind of what causes the crows to come down and attack her. So those little breadcrumbs we're weaving throughout. And again, that's in the script, but it's also I'm very cognizant of how those things track throughout the series. And like Laura mentioned, we had so much freedom at the end of at 10 because it's we've gone through the comedy bits, we've gone through the ups and downs, we've gone through the action scenes and and all of it. So like once we get into 10, it's like, okay, we're free to do whatever we want. We could like push everything. Because there's so many funny moments when they're just yelling at each other like siblings, and then like they have that just incredible moment when they're lying together looking at each other on the verge of death, and then their jubilation when they survive the night. So like there's so many like fun little things that I think kind of led up to 10 that were placed throughout the series.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, what were you going to say something or no? Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's funny, like thinking about 10, we realized, Sunny and I realized early on in that episode, like the common bond that they both share is really Paul and Paul's relationship to each of them. And, Nat cut episode 9, which has the incredible scene of Danny telling Paul, "You got to get away from me." And then we hear gunshots and we don't know what happens. And so we spend all of episode 10 wondering, is Paul alive? Is Paul okay? And both of our characters are wondering. We want the audience to wonder. And so that was something that, based on the earlier episodes, Paul's relationship to both of them and how that played out in the finale, that was something that was unexpected that I didn't realize until we started putting it together, like how important that unspokenness was throughout the episode.
Do you get that too because of like the way, I mean, I think all these are performers that were nominated for Emmys, obviously, like not just Allie and Steven, but Young obviously is Paul and Joseph as well. But like for Young and Paul, I think his performance is so great, and throughout, I guess, like, yeah, can you talk about, obviously, like, he's, like you said, he's not in the finale, but he plays such a large part of the finale because you're like, what happened to him? And like when his text comes through, it's both like such a relief, but so heartbreaking, right? Because of like what he, like, kind of like it is like a severing of their relationship that we saw previously in 9 kind of go beyond maybe repair. I guess, like, yeah, can you talk about like working with those performances, I guess? And yeah, for Young, I mean, like, I just found his performance so incredible, and the arc that Paul goes on throughout the whole series, I just really loved. And I think, again, an actor that I was not super familiar with, seeing him kind of like really crush these scenes is so wonderful. So I guess for you guys as editing, is it like, oh man, like this is great, we got to really like, we're so like, how did you kind of like work with that and like kind of shape that performance, I guess?
Well, I feel like I'm president of the Paul fan club. I love Paul, and I have always, especially in the edit room. And it's funny you have both of us, because I'm president of the Paul fan club and Nat is president of the George fan club.
Yes.
So we both are very excited for both of their nominations. I personally, like, I fell in love with Paul, and if I cut the episode where they're in Vegas and the scene with Amy and Paul at the end of the bed where she's actually being vulnerable and she has someone listen to her, like, I love Young's performance is so incredible. He just mixes this naivete, bro, like gamer idiot guy with this like really sweet, tender, caring, gentle soul. And like, I think he's almost like the whiteboard that like Amy and Danny, their mess kind of reflects back off of, when Danny lies to Paul about Amy, and Paul's like, well, how come I keep fucking everything up? But as the audience, we know it's actually Danny fucking everything up. And it's just so heartbreaking. Like, I just want to protect Paul. Like, I love him so much. And I just want to hold him and tell him that it's all going to be okay,
Definitely. And that, you, George, I mean, like, I think that's another great, like we're saying, like, not surprising it's an Emmy nominated performance, but I was like, man, Joseph is so good. And he, like, it's very, I feel like the way it could be, and in the way I think it's in the performance, obviously, and I think in you guys, the editing as well, is that like it could be very goofy, or just like it could be so silly, but he really does like thread the needle, and like he's so silly, but like you really understand where he's coming from, and he's not a joke. And I think in another show or maybe another edit, it could have been easily made into a joke, right? Like, I guess, can you talk about that and like kind of like finding that nuance in there, because it's so really incredible.
It is great that you're talking, because we are very much. It was actually a joke in the cutting room, because I would be like, I love George so much, and I was like, dude, nah, like, chill. But I really like the character, and I like the actor quite a bit as well. And I love Paul as well, but I have a special place for George because of what you mentioned, like that fine line of like he's kind of goofy and a little bit of a doofus, but he does have the best interests at heart, I think, in his mind. And so just like having that kind of like a little bit of a childlike, he's coddled by his mother, and he, like, people are telling him that he's a superstar even though he's not. It kind of has a little bit of that sadness to it, where he's very like, in a way, he's like kind of like pitiful. And I don't know. I just really liked the way he brought that performance and that kind of lovable loser mentality. But then he really had some really excellent scenes where he's, deep and vulnerable, and you see him, kind of struggling with issues that he had himself. So the depth that Joseph was able to bring to George, I saw that in the dailies, and I really resonated with it because I really enjoyed that character, and I thought he was a great foil for Amy. So when I saw when I saw Joseph get nominated, I was very, very happy because I just really enjoyed that character and I really liked the actor. So for me, I was joking with Laura. I'm like, I'm more excited for Joseph than I am for our nomination, but
Yeah.
yeah, all the
yeah,
characters were great, and so it was
it,
really good to be rewarded for that.
Yeah, for sure. With George, it also builds that great moment in the finale. Obviously, when he it's such a shocking moment when he shoots Danny. I was like completely surprised, and I guess I think again that's a great scene in general. And I guess I'd love to hear you guys talk about editing that, but also what you're saying. I think that the character work throughout the whole season pays off in that moment. I think too, where it's oh wow, you kind of rightly George really does want to protect his I don't even know, it just is really it's really great. But I think that scene is great, and just in general, divorced from the arc of George, which is great. But I love that sequence because it is so shocking. And I guess, did you go through how many how does that work? Are you going through passes to find right when to cut out on that? How did that whole thing how did that part come together, I guess?
That one, we worked on that for a long time. Nat, I feel like you did Nat saw the finale through to the end, and when I was watching it, I wondered. I feel like you guys did do more work on it after I left. Yeah, it played really well. It was a tough scene, because he's got to run up. It's got to feel like a surprise, but you also have to understand his POV and what he thinks is happening. Danny's crouched over Amy, and there was a whole sort of longer part of that scene where Danny gets shot and Amy crawls over to him and she's crying over him and George is pulling her off. And, we found it just played better as a shock. And then, the cut to black, and then you're in the hospital room not knowing what happened. So that scene went through a lot of iterations. And, even after I left, and, I don't know if you want to talk also about how you guys landed there, Matt.
Yeah, it was, surprisingly a little more of a tricky scene than may have appeared on film. But I think just bringing in that element of George kind of thinking that he's doing the right thing, but it's also he doesn't understand the context of hey, they just went through this whole transformative experience out there, but in his mind he's must save Amy, must save Amy, must be good, George. And so he just shoots first, asks questions later, and then technically just getting him down the what is that called,
the tunnel.
The tunnel.
Yeah.
The tunnel was actually quite short, so we had to get his run to be longer. So we shrunk him, we animated him down, and we extended that run quite a bit to get the moment of him being because we also don't want to give it away that it's George. There's a little bit of that mystery of who is this guy? What's happening? To get that element of surprise. And we added some ADR in there of get your hands off her, hey, don't you touch her. So yeah, it took a little bit of finessing, but at the end I think it worked well for the audience, getting the shock value and then also the tying up. That's the last time you see George, so my
your boy.
George.
we leave him wondering, you leave him just what, how's he gonna react to that, right? I think we're spending all this time talking about George, Joseph, and Young, who I absolutely love, obviously, we're talking, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Stephen and Allie. And I think Allie is, again, incredible as well. Laura, I was reading, I think you did another interview you guys did, and I think you had said when you read the script, you were Amy was the character that really stood out to you. And I think that's, and this take nothing away from Stephen, who I absolutely love on the show, but I think Allie is, it's a tricky character. And again, I think the approach is very nuanced, and in a different show, I think that could have gone a lot of different ways. But I guess the way it works here is so great. And I'd love to hear you talk about getting to her to where she is in the finale, and how you kind of thought about her character throughout the whole thing. And, again, keeping that nuance that I'm sure you're getting from her performance too, but bringing that out, and are you kind of focusing on certain things that she's doing maybe as an actor that you're able to really pull out in the edit too, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Allie is amazing. I was so excited when I heard she was going to be in the show because I love her stand-up, and I've seen her act in a few things, but something this long, 10 episodes, you know, opposite Stephen Yoon, who's just like so incredible. I couldn't wait to see what she did. And, you know, reading the scripts, I I loved the character. Like she was so, I feel like I haven't seen a lot of women characters like that on TV. Someone who everything looks so perfect on the outside, and then on the inside, she's fighting all these demons. She has all this repressed rage, but she's just like faking it so hard, and it's really taking it out of her. And also, I just think her complicated relationship with motherhood is really interesting. And, you know, what does she want? She's confused. You know, she thinks she doesn't want to work, but then she gets this validation in Vegas, and she's like, actually, I do like this. I'm really good at this. And this does make me happy. I like being in charge. I'm, you know, it takes a lot out of me, but I'm talented here. And it's really complex. And it was actually really challenging in the edit and, you know, getting feedback because everything does seem so perfect on the surface, you know, TV and film are visual mediums. And so you see her beautiful house, her gorgeous family, all the money, the success. And so finding ways to convey that to the audience was really tricky. And, you know, thankfully her scenes with Danny, especially in the pilot when he comes over and like looks in the garage and in the car and she finally has her little vent about how she just wanted a hot tub the whole time. Like the two of them just really bring it out of each other. And anytime they're on screen together, it's magic. And I think that was the fun part about the finale was it was the two of them together for so long. But I just, you know, watching Allie listen, like she's so in control of her face and her expressions. And you know, in episode 4, in the scene with Young, who plays Paul, at the end of the bed in Vegas, and she's just listening to him talk about Danny, like that's one of my favorite scenes because it's like the first breadcrumb of her thinking, oh, maybe there's more to this guy, maybe he's kind of like me. And just I loved watching her listen to him in that scene. She's just every little tick of her cheek, her eye, like she's so engaged all the time, and it was just so fun to see what she would bring to the performance.
Yeah, it's really incredible. In the finale, do you guys have like a favorite? I guess like, is there a moment in the finale where like, wow, this is like this sequence came together really wonderfully, or like we're harder to figure out, and like we're glad you nailed it, or kind of that kind of thing for you?
I have a bunch.
Yeah, I know. There's just so many. I mean, one of my favorites is the when there's the crossfading where there's a close up of Amy and you're crossfading with Danny, and I thought it was just so like it was so unique, and you know, in a world where sometimes people are like, oh, crossfades, no, crossfades. We really were allowed to go for it there. And then that leading into the moment when they are tripping and we're looking at each other and they body swap, like those two back to back are, I think, just really special moments of, you know, of editing and television storytelling, just because we use so many different techniques and Sunny did such an excellent job directing it, and the camera angles, you're right up there in their face and they're looking at each other, and it's so raw and so much emotion that I think it's like, for me, it's really special. And also the fart in the across the chasm, of course, I love that. It's
Yeah,
very funny moment.
I love the scene where Amy starts tripping, where Danny is in multiple places throughout the scene, where like he's over here and then he's in front of her and she's just like, what is happening? And she has the gun and then it turns into the branch. Like that was something I know Sunny worked really hard on, and designing the shot so that we could cut it a specific way. I love how that scene came out, and I love both of their performances because Steven gets to be goofy, hallucinatory Steven, where he's talking about milk and beef, and they're both so funny and she's so expressive. I love that scene. And I love the opening with the crows. Like those are real crows, they're cravens, I guess. And so the dailies of them were insane, and my assistant Lily Wild was wonderful, and we put locators, so like each crow had its own locator color in Avid, and so I could see like, okay, I need this one to say 2 lines, so when does this one do 2 squawks, and like cutting it together as though they were actors it was really fun. It was really, really challenging, but I love how that turned out, and I love that that's how the episode starts. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the montage that Nat put at the end when they're in the hospital. That wasn't scripted, when Amy's looking at Danny and then they flash back to the scene in the parking lot. Like that was something that came up through editorial, and I felt like it really landed the emotion, and it really like justified her getting into the bed with him, and then like, you know, the hand coming up right at the end, as the cut to black. Like I just feel like they really stuck the landing, and I love how that episode plays.
Yeah, I love the ending, and I want to ask about that. And like, I guess the timing, like, yeah, like you said, like the timing of the last cut and stuff. And Nat, do you want to talk a little about that too? Because like, it's so good.
Yeah, it was it was, of course, it was right at the finish line, and we were really close to being done with the episode. And there was notes that were like, well, we want to kind of like tie the room together a little more. And Sunny and I were both kind of like, what are we gonna do here? And then we decided to do like a little bit of a flashback audio wise at first, with just the horn going, with the echoing, and then having some moments of dialogue between the two. And that kind of naturally led to Sunny being like, let's get Amy in the car, making that decision to flip Danny off. And like, so we actually went out on a shoestring at like the very last minute and got that shot. And it worked so well because it's just like all of a sudden it clicks into place where you're like, okay, like we see her think about it, we see her make that decision that ultimately led to this point where they're in the hospital. And like, who would have thought just flipping some guy up in the parking lot of some hardware store would lead you to this moment? And I think the audio and the music and everything in the moment, I think it kind of just tied the room together nicely. And then the of course the music that Sunny had picked there at the end and all that was really good as well.
Yeah, the music is great. I feel like we could talk about the show for so long, but we unfortunately have to wrap up. But I love the show, and I love your work. Emmy nominees Laura Zempel and Nat Fuller for Beef. You can watch all the episodes on Netflix, and it's nominated 13 times, including Best Limited Series. Congratulations on the nomination, guys, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much.